I wanted to thank you because, as you know, the whole recovery community is going crazy right now.
Yeah.
So you being our in-house expert, this is really going to be interesting because you're the one person I think that I know that's qualified to be an expert on what California sober is and is not.
Hmm.
And I think it's extremely important that we have some clarity here. And just to give you the disclaimer, because we're live, that
Hmm.
most people in the recovery community, I think, subconsciously always had an idea of what it may be.
Hmm.
But the way Demi Lovato placed it, I think people just lost it. One, because I think people revere her and she has a sober song and she was always this. But I follow Demi Lovato and she has a lot of ups and downs and struggles like most of us
Yeah.
because we're
Yeah.
all in recovery, right? And
Hmm.
it's just interesting. And I think that what triggered me, so I can only speak from my perspective, what triggered me was when I was like, you know what is this California sober thing? And I like Demi Lovato. So I looked at her interview and she was like, well, I'm smoking weed in moderation with alcohol. And then all of my alarms went off, being a recovery, coach and everything like that, and being on my journey with alcohol and with my experience with my friends with hard drugs. I'm like, I used to have to barricade people in rooms who got too drunk that was trying to get outside to use. So I'm like, yo, how the hell can you use harm reduction from a hard drug like heroin with alcohol and weed? And that's where I think people just got confused. Then it's also the question of the name, California sober. And people's like, well, you can't be sober if you're doing this and that. And I think there's a lot of like cloudiness there. So, ladies
Hmm.
and gentlemen, we have Kaitie Degen here. You guys already know her. She's an in-house person of the Sober is Dope family, CEO and founder of Sober Saturdays. And I just want you to let the world know exactly how did you come about um, knowing or being part of the California sober movement, what it is in your opinion, and can you just give us all a background
Yes.
as an expert?
Yeah. So thanks so much for having me on and for jumping on this topic because I've been getting so many messages from people. And it's honestly so disheartening because a lot of the messages I get come from, emotional concern, which is obviously, of course, valid, but also from a lack of education around the whole situation. So, well, for me personally, like when I quit drinking back in 2018, or when my harm reduction journey started, or my sober curious journey, even, I personally at that time wasn't even in the mindset of like, I want to completely quit drinking alcohol. Like, I was like, I want to be able to say no. That was my thing. Like, I just want to be able to say no when I want to. And obviously, at that time in my journey, I didn't understand recovery or sobriety in the same sense that I do now. But something that I did know was that I still wanted to go to clubs. I still wanted to go to festivals, and I wanted certain programs weren't going to work for me. And when I say certain programs, I say AA because I saw my family go through AA, and it didn't work. I come from a family of addicts and a family of alcoholics, who are still active in alcoholism and active in addiction and lots of different types of drugs. And I'm the only person in my whole family from generations of addicts who have gotten out of it. And I'm the only person who I can genuinely say that I feel healed from the entire experience and that I can personally be around any type of drug or alcohol at this point and not be triggered based off of my experiences and my healings. So for me, what Cali sober is, and what from my understanding from my studies and my education and talking to other people in this realm is Cali sober is the absence of alcohol with the presence of plant medicines. So that means, psychedelics and cannabis and not alcohol whatsoever. So from my understanding, like what it sounds like Demi Lovato is talking about, first of all, it sounds like she's just coming around to this sort of ideology. So she doesn't know a lot about it. But it also sounds like she's kind of like doing her own type of harm reduction in hopes to get to a place of full Cali sobriety, which would be no alcohol and then the use of plant medicines. So like for me, the biggest thing is just that everyone's sober journey is different and how you get there is going to be different. And what works for some people is not going to work for other people. And for me, in my sober journey, I've watched my family members go to all of these programs, do assisted living, take the medications, go to the court-ordered therapies. I've seen them do it all, and they're still struggling. And when I got sober, I was on 5 different SSRIs. I was taking Zoloft, Wellbutrin, I was taking Ativan, I was taking a mood balancer in between. I had to take 5 pills a day just to feel okay. Not feel great, but just to feel okay. And, my background before I started drinking and going into my fun cocaine habit was in Eastern medicine. I went to school for traditional Chinese medicine. I've been very athletic my entire life, and my relationship and conversation with my body has always been very close. Like, I did a lot of yoga, a lot of meditation before I started doing cocaine, and like I'm very, very close with my intuition. Obviously, when I was in my addictive days, that was sort of quieted a bit. But as I got more and more sober, my intuition built more. And because of that, I had this intuitive feeling that my SSRIs were I called it the safe zone. So I wouldn't get really sad, but I also wasn't capable of getting really happy. And I lived in this realm for a while because I felt safe there. I felt that my body, because of what I had gone through and my traumas and my experiences and my addictive tendencies, that I was incapable of living without them in a safe way. And my business partner, or my past business partner, he was a psychedelic doctor. So in Canada, the legalities around these things are a lot different. Obviously, cannabis is legal. You can go anywhere and buy cannabis. The education around cannabis is amazing. Like, I've worked with certain companies and gotten like specific education about terpenes and cannabinoids and CBD and CBG and CBN and all of this really fun, amazing stuff. Sorry, my ADD. I'm like,
No, you said a lot of great stuff. You said a lot of great stuff. What I said in the beginning was, I think cannabis is the best form of harm reduction. I have no beef with it. I said it on our first episode about 3 days ago. I did an episode, and it was about California sober, and I went off. I was like, ah. But the thing was, the initial idea was that, yeah, weed is it has its benefits. It has so many benefits. It's right? It is a drug, but it's not heroin, fentanyl, meth, right? So if someone is using it to get off of something harder, which is what harm reduction is, it's perfect. But then, like, me not being educated enough in the subject, I just took what Demi Lovato said for face value and was like, I heard the alcohol, it sent a lot of alarm. So so what you're saying is California sober is strictly the use of marijuana in a form of harm reduction and moderation, excluding all other drugs, including alcohol.
Yeah, and I mean, like, cannabis and psychedelics can help with more things than just addiction. Like, I use cannabis to help with my past eating disorders. To help with my appetite. I use cannabis to help with my ADHD. Like, in order to be able to sit down and not talk over you or interrupt. Like, smoking really helps with something like that. Or I have insane insomnia. Like, I usually sleep 3 to 5 hours a night. Without the use of cannabis, like, I don't know what I would have to take from the doctor. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, for me, it's like, it helps me in so many aspects. Like, I have a sex lube that has THC in it, and oh my gosh, can I tell you, from someone who has had like sexual trauma in the past, this has helped me so much.
Nice.
Not just that, but CBD and facial serums. Like, I have eczema. I have THC rubs that help with my fibromyalgia. That is much more prominent now that I don't drink. Cannabis is an amazing tool in so many aspects, not just the way you ingest it, but topically and cooking with it. It's honestly just a lack of education around it. And I think when people hear people like Demi Lovato speak like, oh, I'm smoking cannabis, they think about it from their perspective, like, oh, like, she's smoking cannabis, and then they base it off of their knowledge. But it's like, you don't know how she's using it. You don't know what that means to her. You don't know how that feels inside her body. And also, the way that she's talking about it doesn't mean that's how everyone else in the sober world uses it. You know what I mean? Like, she's just a celebrity.
Right. And I think maybe because the government and FDA and all of these different administrations labeled cannabis, which is a natural substance, as a drug, it shifted people's perception. right?
Yes.
And now that it's being legalized, maybe that will start to change in time, because it sounds like it's more of a medicine, and
Yes.
it has multiple medicinal uses.
Yes. Well, like I know even from experience with my family who's still in active addiction and alcoholism, like I have a harder time trying to get them on psychedelics right now because they're in a gray area. But, you know, my grandma, now that it's legal, and my grandpa and my, you know, my aunts and uncles, now that it's legal, they are more open to learning and understanding cannabis. Whereas like when I was in high school, you know what I mean? They were like, this is devil's lettuce, get it out of here.
Right,
You know?
right,
And it's
right.
like, it's been ingrained in us to think about it a certain way. But like, that is just like a construct, you know what I mean? Before these laws were on these things were used as medicine, you know, in different cultures and different, you know, aspects. It's like it really is dependent where you are on the world.
Right. So I just think we can't be in this closed minded, sober is absolute. And, you know, I think so. This is the thing. Do you think that using cannabis by itself can allows if it works with the concept of sobriety? So someone could say, I'm sober if I'm not using my drug of choice, which is problematic, but I use cannabis as a form of harm reduction, so I'm sober, right? Because
Yeah.
that in my mind, I think it makes sense. You're sober from your drug, that's a problem. Like for me, it's alcohol. I only have a problem with alcohol. I never tried anything else. As
Yeah.
long as I'm not drinking alcohol, in my mind, I'm
Yeah.
sober,
Yeah, like
right?
I think that that's the key word. In your mind, you're sober. Like I think as a sober community, we egotistically, subconsciously attach to these labels that really are like irrelevant to our freaking experiences.
Right.
Like if something is helping me, if something is helping me stay off of heroin, and
Right.
heroin is my problem, then I'm going to use that thing to help me stay off of heroin. Am I going to care what Lucy over here is telling me about my experience? No, because I'm not doing heroin, you know?
Right.
And it's
Right.
like what works for me is going to work for me, and I just have to be honest with myself and be like, I know that these people are telling me that this isn't medicine, but I'm using it and it is a different experience than what they're saying. And so am I going to listen to what they're saying, or am I going to listen to my body?
Right, right. So we just have to be careful that we're not judging people prematurely and alienating people who are also on the recovery journey, because
Yeah.
that's dangerous. That's
Well,
dangerous.
and like, you know, like harm reduction works for some people and cold turkey works for some people. But I can tell you every addict I've ever met has never been able to stop cold turkey, and, you know, is on like I said, you know, like double digits in different rehab centers and stuff. So it's like, if someone wants to try a different modality to see if it works because, you know, they're freaking getting desperate and they've overdosed on all these other modalities, then who are we to say, that's wrong?
Right, right, right. Who are we to say that's wrong? So we have to check ourselves. I think a lot of people are getting ahead of themselves. That's why I want to do this, because I felt like I was coming from a pedestal on my almighty shit, and I didn't have the right to do that, because I'm still struggling every day.
Mhm,
And right, and I didn't like it when people judged me when I was drinking. So I
mhm,
shouldn't judge someone else who may be using that modality to do whatever they need to do, right? But I think the fundamental issue, and this is important to address, the
mhm.
perception to kids, people who may not be as educated on what it is, people who's looking for excuse to continue to use, who's probably has problems in these areas that need to let it go. So just, I think the name, I think harm reduction, everyone has no problem with. Moderation, everyone seems to be cool with. California sober, people gets a little freaked out, because they're like, okay, so now we're giving people some new form of creative sobriety that is not well studied. We don't truly understand, as giving
Huh.
people a free pass to use, right?
I
Is
mean,
that fair to say, or is that still off base?
well, like, okay, so for example, well, in my opinion, I guess, like for me, if you Google the word sober right now, what
Right.
will come up is that it only pertains to alcohol. And that's what it will tell you, that the word sober only pertains to alcohol, you know? So that's why people say clean and sober, because you're clean off of drugs and you're sober off of alcohol.
Right.
But depending on what rehab you've gone to, depending on what program you've gone to, they're going to tell you their version of things. And then you're going to live your life with that version in your experience. But like, if you spend any time deciding for yourself, you know, or like looking things up in a way that works for you, it's like, I don't know. I just find that if someone is telling me that they are healing and they're getting better, I'm going to pay attention to their feeling and not say, yeah, but what's your title? You know what I mean? Like,
Right,
it's
right.
like, what? It's just ego to me.
It is ego, and I get it. And I'm looking like, so you're someone who you're endorsed cannabis, you use it medicinally. I'm
Mm-hmm.
having a clear conversation with you. You
Yeah.
appear sober. So the other definition of sober is no noticeable effects from a substance or something like that. You have no noticeable effects of being intoxicated or
Well,
anything like
it's
that.
it's how it affects you. So for me, it's
Right.
like, you know what I mean? That like it's how it affects you. But I ask myself some questions. Is this making me a better person? Is this making me do a better job at what I'm doing? Am I being a better partner because of this? You
Right.
know, I ask myself these things. I don't ask myself superficial things like, oh, is this person going to think I'm acting in a way that they think is inappropriate? Not important to me. What I'm trying to do is live my best life and in my healthiest way. And if I know that, you know, I can have panic attacks from having conversations like this, or I can even come off as rude from talking over you because of my ADHD. And I know that if I smoke weed beforehand, that will eliminate those things and make me show up better here, then that's what I'm going to pay attention to. Not, oh, I wonder if this person is going to think a certain way about me because of their own perception of this instead of what my actual experience is.
It's amazing. You're amazing, by the way. You know, we got to talk more because I miss
Yeah.
you from our last. And you know, you opened my eye up. I kind of feel a little bit bad because you know I think I jumped on the bandwagon too fast. Um, and you know, I was looking at the Urban Dictionary and the definitions of California sober online. It's just tough. It's tough because you know, everyone wants to feel like there's so many of us that's just fighting to stay in this lane to keep it together. And
Mm,
I think we're very prideful of our recovery and sobriety. And, it's just
and
unfortunate.
that's important, you know, to be prideful. But like, you
Right.
know, it comes back in other ways in sobriety too, like in recovery, people with higher numbers, you know, the way that they talk to people with lower numbers. Like I
Right.
specifically don't keep my number. When someone asks me, I'm like, I don't remember. Like I can tell you
Right.
how many times I've drinking in 3 years, which is five, which is crazy for me for someone who used to drink 5 times a week. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like if someone talks to me and they're like, well, I'm 10 years sober. And I'm like, okay, well, that's cool. I don't know your experience. I don't know if you're having a good time. I don't know if you're actually healed or working on your traumas. Like, that doesn't matter to me. You
And
know,
that's right, right. I do know what you mean, and you're right. We're not taking in account trauma. We're not
exactly.
taking in account the person's drug of choice and how dark their experience may be and what drug they're coming off. Someone might really be like,
Yeah.
yo, I'm coming off of the most terrible heroin addiction ever, and I'm proud and I'm doing this. And then people's judging
Yeah.
them, which could create anxiety, reactivate the
Which could
trauma,
make them relapse. You
and
know,
make them relapse.
judgment.
Right,
It's
right,
judgment.
right. So relapse through judgment. This is deep. This is deep.
Yeah.
I needed this. So we need to put things into perspective. We can't let Demi Lovato shake us up every time she has some type of shift in
No, I'm like,
her.
and do we need to agree with her perspective? No, but do we need to take celebrities seriously? No, you know, just
Right.
because it's on national television, think about all the bull crap that's been on national television lately. You know what I mean? It's like, if you
Right.
really want to focus on this and you want to get the right definition out, then we need to like find the people who know about it and try and get their voices heard instead of like promoting and spending all this time and all of these conversations on the wrong definition or what this person's experience is instead of what she's trying to accomplish.
Right, right, right. And you know, after our conversation earlier, I submitted a new definition to the Urban Dictionary because the one that was on there is where it created the confusion. And I really think whoever put that on the Urban Dictionary should have did their research because that's where people are going and
Exactly.
that's where the alcohol component is coming in. So
Yeah.
for all of you guys who's been using cannabis only for years as a legitimate form of harm reduction and doing it successfully, this bad definition is just giving you guys so much negative publicity and so much judgment. It's
And it's
bad.
like the whole point of the sober community is to bring people in and to make it more accessible for people. And so it's like
Right.
if step one for someone getting off of heroin is cannabis and then sobriety, then why would we deny them access to this beautiful community of support that we've supposedly created?
Right, right, right. And I think so again, going back, I think everyone is most likely probably somewhat cool with the cannabis part. I think it was the misunderstanding of the alcohol and cannabis, which is kind of like a perceptual cocktail bomb that can't go that you literally will probably
You
go
don't,
wrong.
yeah, you don't, yeah. Anytime I've ever used cannabis and alcohol together, it's ended bad,
It ended bad, right? So I
Yeah.
think that's where people go, wait a minute, that's a little bit too much. I can understand, but I think no one has beef with cannabis because even me, I did a few posts, and every time I talk about weed and stuff, I think about you. But I smoked weed from 15 years old all the way to when I was in my mid 20s. It did a lot of stuff for me. And now, if I ever tried, right, it would affect me in a way where it
Well, it could
messes.
be, yeah, it could be dependent on how you're using it too, right? Like when I was younger, the way I use cannabis is not how I use cannabis now. And
Right.
like, my education around cannabis is different now. And like, you're also not the same person as you were back then. So you wouldn't use it in the same way. You're different.
Yeah,
So like,
we're not rolling blunts.
yeah, like for example, like I can't smoke sativas. You know what I mean? Sativas make me
Oh,
hella anxious, hella paranoid. I won't sleep. Like I don't smoke sativas. Did I
oh,
know that before? No.
no.
Did I try sativas and then think weed was like the horrible? Yeah. Did I learn about it and realize like I can smoke indicas or indica hybrids and I smoke at certain times of day to help me with certain things and then it can be beneficial? Yes. But do people have bad experiences and then talk about those and never learn and try and have a new experience? All the time. And it gives everything a bad rep.
Right, right. Let me ask you this: why you think is cannabis is being legalized at such a fast pace? What is it? New research? Is it finally that the science is catching up with the law? And
It's personal experiences. Like you talk to people who use cannabis and they'll tell you it's not what we've been told.
right,
Like I didn't risk my business and like what my family thought about me and my reputation online to talk about something that didn't work. You know
right,
what I mean? And that doesn't like and works in so many modalities. Like and the fact that like, no one's ever died from cannabis. No one, like think about what alcohol does and that it's legal. And then think about all of the things I told you that cannabis helps me with and it wasn't legal. So
right,
to me, it gets frustrating and it sounds difficult because growing up in the system, being following these systematic rules, seeing my family not get better, and then trying these things that were not legal, like psychedelics and cannabis, and then being the first person in generations of addiction and alcoholism, be the first person to heal.
right,
And then, it's frustrating because I'm like, I took a course, obviously, through the San Francisco Psychedelic Society of Psychedelics. And I worked with, like, my instructors were like Dr. Fadiman and people who are on the forefront of this research. And, he told us some of the studies they did, and it was incredible and infuriating at the same time because, they did tested to see if microdosing mushrooms was as potent for pain relief as opioids were. The answer is yes. Did test to see, obviously, if psychedelics were addictive. The answer is no. And that right there is infuriating to me. When where I am in the world, we're having an opioid crisis. We're prescribing things to get people off of these things, and it's also extremely addictive. And scientifically, there's this known evidence with these underground therapies that these non-addictive things can get people off of these addictive things. But the problem is they're not regulated, and the government doesn't make money off of them, and so they're not as widely used.
right, right. Dr. Fadiman is brilliant. I discovered him when I was studying under Tim Ferris, and so this
Yeah.
is let's like microdosing. Let's just talk about that because I always was fascinated by that
Oh my gosh.
and the mental health aspects. I think it's another component that people are not looking at, the use of these drugs for mental health, which takes us out the category kind of the addiction and stuff because it could be um it's different uses, right?
For
So
sure. So like, yeah, obviously when I was in high school, like the way I did psychedelics in high school with my lack of knowledge, just like cannabis, is not the way that I do them now and experience them now. So like for me, one of the most incredible things that changed my perspective was watching that movie Dosed. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but
no, I haven't.
it's essentially about a woman from my city. So she was a heroin addict for 15 years and then was on methadone, and she was still slipping up all the time. And she did a psychedelic treatment here in the area that I live in, and in one dose, she was completely cured of her addictions from methadone, from heroin, and from opioids. And like,
Wow.
I'm like, sorry, I'm like kind of shaking talking about this because, oh, are you there?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. I can see you. It's a little choppy, but it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, you're
Okay,
good.
sweet. Yeah. So to me, having family members who have been struggling with addiction and taking these medications for years, and knowing that this medicine is there and that they could take it and it could cure them in an instance, in a day, that was insane to me. And as a person in the recovery world who is, talking about recovery, I thought it was absolutely absurd of me to have this knowledge and not share it with the recovery world.
Right. You're very courageous for that. And I think you
Yeah.
need more support. I think definitely you do. You feel like you have support, or is it a lot of judgment and ridicule?
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, no, I the more when I started talking about, cannabis was one thing, now more sober communities are talking about cannabis, which is great. But when I first did that, it was like a really big deal. And I a lot of people got mad at me. And then, when I started introducing psychedelics, that was even worse. I had a lot of sober profiles call me out or, call me out and yeah, try and say that like my version is wrong or that whatever the heck they're trying to say. But it's like, it sucks because it's from a lack of education and it creates segregation, and they don't realize that they're pushing so many people in the sober community who need this community out, and for reasons that they're even unaware of.
Right, right, right. But I never had a problem with the whole micro. I always suspect because I mean I'm a scientific guy. Like beyond everything, I always was waiting for the science to catch up with that because we know we always knew that going back to the '60s, that it was a lot. It's like the ayahuasca or the
Yeah, ayahuasca for sure.
ayahuasca,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's a spiritual thing, the DMT and the spirit
Yeah, DMT
molecule.
too.
Right. So I definitely always understood that as far as spiritual development and the mental health, but it's cool now. Let me ask you, is cannabis considered a psychedelic? Or is
I
they're separate? Is cannabis is here
I don't know.
and
I
it's
guess kind of like if you smoke too much weed, I guess you can have like a psychedelic experience, but I don't
okay.
know if it's like labeled in the same way, like
It's okay.
under the law. Um,
Got you. Got
yeah,
you.
yeah.
So with the California sober thing, is it any like so you really gave us you opened up my eyes one, and I just want to apologize to everyone in the community because the whole conversation should always be inclusive no matter where we are on our journey, and it shouldn't be in any alienation, and we shouldn't be too quick to judge and to put people in a box because that's dangerous. And if the tables was turned and I was doing something that helped me on my mental health, my trauma journey and my addiction journey, and a bunch of people was online shooting me down, that's
Mhm.
enough to make anyone lose it, and that's not what sober is dope is about, and that's definitely not what I'm about. I'm just plain old pop. So I never been fake. I never been one to judge people, and I can't. That's why I felt like I had to be a bigger person and reach out to you and find someone I trust. Because I was racking my brain. I was like, hey, you know the expert on this. She knows everything about this, right? When do you know where California sober started? Was it back in is it 10 years old? Is it 5 years old? Is it just something that was always there?
Sure, to be honest, like I don't know that answer. Like I know when I found it, I was just so grateful that it existed, and
Right.
then but like even if you search up the hashtag and stuff, there's not a ton of stuff on it. Like a
I
lot of
know.
sober communities are still scared to talk about cannabis, and also I think that a lot of sober profiles probably use psychedelics even and are unable to speak about it because of where they are in the world. I'm lucky being in Canada and being in Vancouver, British Columbia specifically,
Right.
and having the ability and the freedom to talk about these things. And that's why I took it upon myself to be the person to do this, because I legally am safe to do it. Whereas lots of people in the world are not in the same position and literally cannot speak about it.
Wow, wow. I Googled you earlier just to find a specific pic for a thumbnail, and you came up everywhere. I said, my girl Kaitie, busy. You busy. I was so proud. I said, you everywhere. You have articles and stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, listen, this is definitely Kaitie's definitely an authority. She did an amazing episode where she really came clean on the Sober's Dope podcast about her trauma, her abuse, and her past. I trust her, and this is just it's just eye-opening for me that although it may be scary when we hear these new terms, and it may trigger us or remind us of how far we came, or may scare us a bit, we can't be closed-minded to what other people are going through on their recovery journey, and we must be open-minded to new thoughts, new behaviors, and new ideas. A few people reached out to me on TikTok and said, you should be ashamed of yourself for judging people because I use cannabis for my mental health and all that. And I had to remind them, like, yo, I have no beef with cannabis. I never did. Anyone that I just can't smoke it no more because I'm burnt out. I'm fried. I'm too old. I was smoking since I was a kid, so I'm done.
Really?
But and I'm sober as dope. I just don't need it. I feel good. I meditate and stuff like that. But I remember one thing when I was smoking before I got into drinking. I was just regular pop, poetry, martial arts, meditating. It
Poetry?
was right. Oh yeah. Oh, I'm ill with the poets. I'm ill. I have some poems for days. I rap too, so
I'm here
yeah,
for that.
word. And I just remember that I had no problems when I was smoking weed as a kid. But it wasn't until alcohol was introduced in my life that generational curse and that addiction and that whole generational problem hit me, and I was always had a problem with it. So there's clear night and day there. I do encourage anyone out there that's struggling with addiction to be open-minded to harm reduction. It does work. To be open-minded, and I encourage us all just to be a little bit more compassionate. So we should cut Demi Lovato some slack. You said something really good, that she's using what she's using in her way to help her on her journey. And overdosing on heroin is no joke. So if she's talking about a little pot, then that we shouldn't really beat up on her.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Totally. Yeah, and like the other thing too is like like the really cool thing, like my sober journey before I started doing psychedelics and like microdosing psychedelics, before, let's say that again.
No problem.
My sobriety before doing psychedelics and my sobriety after are night and friggin' day. Like the way that I always describe it are like when I was doing psychedelics, or when I wasn't doing psychedelics and I was sober, I would go into like a bar or a restaurant. And even though I wasn't triggered to drink or having a craving, I was still very aware of all of the alcohol that was around me. Whereas like when I started microdosing, every thought about alcohol and every feeling around it just left. Like it was gone. Like it melted away, and it was completely different. So yeah.
So it shifted your perception, and it changed you. And they always say that if you have a psychic change, it can enact a DNA change, and you could get off something really fast. And I think that's what happened with you. Well, Kaitie, I know you're busy. You have meetings all day. This has really been eye-opening. I can't wait to post this on YouTube. And I'm gonna do another series of videos, because my first series of videos was talking about the distinction between weed and California sober being cool, but not being cool with the alcohol component. Just because you and I both agree, that's crazy.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like, don't get me wrong, harm reduction, like tapering yourself off to whatever,
that's cool. That's cool.
Don't introduce alcohol into moderation and then call yourself sober. That will trigger you.
That will trigger you. Ladies, hey, we got light at the end of the tunnel. That was it. That's it. So the expert cleared it up for us, and then you was compassionate on both sides of the argument. So we all should be in agreement. Listen, Kaitie, I love you. You can let the world know where they can find you again real quick, and any final thoughts?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Sober Saturdays with the Z at the end, or my personal account even at Kaitie Degen. Yeah.
She's the champion. Thank you so much for coming on as our expert on California sober. Hopefully we get this episode out to everyone to really open up their minds. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Sober is Dope podcast. I'm your host, Pop Buchanan. I love you all. Let's be compassionate, and I catch you on the other side. God bless everyone. Hold on.